Here it is, Andy. Media and courts in US did
No,
not bend.
I'm not able to see anything here.
మీకు రావడం లేదా? యువర్ స్క్రీన్ షేరింగ్ అని వస్తుంది నాకు. వచ్చిందండి. షుడ్ I'll stop and share again once.
Yeah, it is come now.
అయ్యో నేనే కట్ చేశాను. It's coming, అండి.
It's gone again. Yeah.
వచ్చిందండి.
Okay.
Media and courts in US.
Nothing is there. James Prashant has started screen sharing, but it's not coming here. Screen here.
ఇక్కడ నాకు వ్యూయింగ్ విండోస్ కూడా కనపడడం లేదు ఏంటో. Maybe something
there is something wrong with your system only.
I think my system అనుకుంటా అండి.
ఏదో Can you read out? Hello? Yeah, దొరగారు. నమస్తే అన్న. అన్న ఇవాళే గుర్తు చేసుకుంటున్నా. అంత బాగానన్నా? అవునన్నా. అన్నా 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 ఓకే.
Hello?
Yeah, 1 minute, James. Yeah, it's coming now. Yeah. Anna. నేను మాట్లాడతానన్నా. నేను నాకు ఒక 2 days టైం ఇవ్వండి, నేను మాట్లాడి చూస్తాను అక్కడ. పోయేద్దామన్నా, పోయేద్దాం. లేదు పోయేద్దామన్నా, ఒకసారి పోయేద్దాం. అన్నా ఓకే అన్నా. అవును. సరేనే. ఒకసారి మీరు మనం టైం తీసుకుంటాం, ఆయన ఎప్పుడు ఢిల్లీలో ఉంటాడో తెలుసుకుంటే పోయేద్దామన్నా. ఓకే అన్న. సరేనా. Yeah, James, sorry. Hello, James.
The United States. They need to be aware of the differences and also about what needs to be done. This is Sonali Ranade. Are you following her on Twitter?
Yeah.
Quite a lively feed she has.
Yes.
To be able to dissect the triumph of Biden and traditional partisan politics over Trump's new right-wing populism, we need to step back and re-examine what the contestation was all about. Only then we can get what has been achieved and what lessons it holds for India. Let us consider what classical liberalism was all about. In the words of Francis Fukuyama, while classical liberalism sought to, sir, Francis Fukuyama తెలుసు కదండి.
Yeah.
While classical liberalism sought to protect the autonomy of equal individuals, the new ideology of multiculturalism promoted equal respect for cultures, even if those cultures abridged the autonomy of the individuals who participated in them. So, ఇక్కడ she contrasted between equal rights and multiculturalism.
Correct.
Classical liberalism was always focused sharply on the individual as opposed to the collective. In దీంట్లో ట్రైబలిజం స్టడీస్లో you see the collective అంటే ఇట్స్ ది ట్రైబ్ అండి, tribalism, and you see of the uh, um, the contrast between collectivism and individualism. Usually వీళ్ళు Americans are usually termed as rugged individuals, and so whereas when you because they need to be part of a tribe, so entirely two different mindsets ikkada. So whereas French people individualists, there are little they have a little bit of this and that.
Okay.
So that is the thing when you study cross-cultural studies law. Usually this is the main topic there. Classical liberalism was always focused sharply on the individual as opposed to the collective. It was an individual's capacity for moral agency, enterprise, and change that brought progress, and that was always being crushed by collectives ranging from tribal patriarchy through oppressive religiosity to state's tyranny. To offset these pressures from the collective, so for example, capitalism's huge success is also, partly due to the individualistic nature anamata.
Correct.
To offset these pressures from the collective, it was imperative to set the individual free. And classical liberalism.
Just hold on, please. 1 second.
Okay.
Yadagiri. బ్లాక్ కార్యక్రమము అక్కడ మన అదే ఫోర్ట్ వరంగల్ అని చెప్తుండ్రు. వాళ్ళు నాకు 7:30 కన్ఫర్మ్ చేస్తారు. కన్ఫర్మ్ చేసినాక నీకు ఫోన్ చేస్తాను. Please go ahead.
To offset these pressures from the collective, it was imperative to set the individual free. And classical liberalism sought to do so without diminishing the tribe, religion, society, or state. I'm just going to reread that sentence. And classical liberalism sought to do so without diminishing the tribe, religion, society, or state. So without destroying the tribe, classical liberalism tried to set the individual free. So it was kind of a complex thing going on there.
Correct.
Instead, it sharply defined some inalienable rights against these very collectives and sought to harness the state in their protection. So I'll just reread these two sentences again. And classical liberalism sought to do so without diminishing the tribe, religion, society, or state. Instead, it sharply defined some inalienable rights against these very collectives and sought to harness the state in their protection.
Correct. Yes. That is what is happening now. Yes.
But in the long journey since Renaissance, something more happened. Again, to quote Fukuyama, The left continued to be defined by its passion for equality, but that agenda shifted from its earlier emphasis on the conditions of the working class to the often psychological demands of an ever widening circle of marginalized
Marginalized
groups.
groups. Okay.
Okay. What Fukuyama defines here is the left liberal creep for what needs to be protected in a liberal democracy.
Right.
Again, it drifted away from the individual to collectives. First, in the name of the individuals, the definition of individual itself was expanded from the strictly personal to the groups in which individuals often associate with, for instance, religious or cultural. When you allow this, you have the absurd position when you're defending a fascist version of Islam in the name of protecting the individual, while denouncing the majority religion on the very same ground.
This is wonderful.
చాలా బాగా రాసుకొచ్చింది.
Uh,
This happened in India as well, with some misguided liberals vociferously supporting the most outrageous religious demands of some Muslim clerics regarding divorce, right to pray, polygamy, or whatever, while insisting that Hindus shun the very same practices. So, ikkada law should take the
correct.
అంతే కదండి.
And,
వాట్ లా ఆఫ్ ద ల్యాండ్ ఏముందో దానికి ఇట్ షుడ్ హ్యావ్ ప్రెసిడెన్స్ ఓవర్ అదర్. దట్ ఈస్ వాట్ ఈస్ హ్యాపెనింగ్ ఇన్ ఫ్రాన్స్
yeah,
ఇప్పుడు.
yeah.
Clearly, you can't have such an absurd position, and the right wing pounced on the absurdity to build a whole new campaign of religious resentment against the liberal state. Secondly, note what happened to equality in the process of expanding the sphere of the individual. The right to equality of individuals itself morphed from being about fraternity to equality for various groups of individuals, some valid, some gross distortions of the very notion of liberalism, inasmuch as they came to mean a demand for equality between Christianity and Islam in, say, the US, to take just an example. So, equality
I lost your voice, James.
Hello?
James. Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. So, the equality for all individuals పోయి అది equality for groups ki
Groups వచ్చింది. Correct.
groups ki got precedence. Guaranteeing the right of an individual to pray to a god of her choosing is not the same as asking to place Christianity and Islam on an equal footing in the US. This creep in the scope of left's idea of equality between two cultural groups flies in the face of the liberal idea of an individual. But the glaring contradiction was ignored, and the left and liberals combined to create a plethora of new entitlements that weren't anchored in the classical liberal idea of liberating an oppressed individual from oppressive collectives.
Okay.
So I'm just rereading this, sir, again. But this glaring contradiction was ignored, and the left and liberals combined to create a plethora of new entitlements that weren't anchored in the classical liberal idea of liberating an oppressed individual from oppressive collectives. Ante your again, basically, there should be as a one law for the entire country.
Country, yes.
You can't say like one group can rob a bank and other group cannot rob a bank అని ఉండదు కదండి.
Yeah, correct.
No wonder this inflamed passions on the majority side as unwarranted mollycoddling of minorities in a manner that would change the very identity of the polity. The left and the liberals had walked into a moral and existential quagmire, and in the process, abandoned the individual in search of new windmills to
రైట్.
equalize. Huh. So, ఇండివిజువల్లోని
తీసుకొస్తున్నాం.
వదిలేశారు
ఆ,
అంటుంది ఈవిడ.
అదే.
So, the first lesson from the US for Indian liberals is to understand the basic nature of the conundrum and not to draw false conclusions from Trump's defeat in a hurry.
కరెక్ట్.
Very few philosophers and thinkers have actually put out the flaws in the liberal case in popular press, though I guess that will happen in due course. There is lot to learn here. The India debate on populism and fascism continues to be singularly uninformed. In India, there is scant realization why and where the liberals went wrong in aping the US's cultural tropes. మనోళ్ళు అక్కడ అదేం చేస్తున్నారు, ఇక్కడ ఫాలో అయిపోయారు.
అంతే.
యాక్చువల్
అంతే.
యాక్చువల్ లిబరల్ philosophy and they do not understand. We need to understand liberal creep, its inherent logical fallacies, and the consequent popular resentment that fascists have harnessed for taking their evil ideology mainstream.
యా.
Unless we understand why fascism is popular and fed by hate and resentment grounded in liberal creep, we will not be able to fight them. Now that we have the conceptual field clear, let us see how the US was able to hold populism in check and not cede further ground to it. US media supported liberals. I must emphasize that I don't think right wing populism has diminished under Trump. Trumpism is intact. Democracy has been barely able to hold its own in the face of right wing hate and resentment for now. The real war lies ahead. So, the real question is what helped preserve democracy and created the opportunity for the battle that lies ahead. The liberal fight back was along two axes. Two axes, spelling tappadindandi akkada.
యా.
First, the appeal to reason over faith addressed to groups not already sold on right wing resentment. Okay. This included attacks on right wing absurdities. I'm reading the sentence again. First, the appeal to reason over faith addressed to groups not already sold on right wing resentment. So they really focused on faith. Idandi. Oh, I'm sorry. They really focused on reason.
రీజన్ నాట్ ఆన్ ఫెయిత్. యా.
Yeah. The reason. Okay. నేను confused అయ్యాను. This included attacks on right wing absurdities via parody, humor, reasoned argument, fact checking, and debunking right wing lies and absurdities. Secondly, it was centered on supporting all institutions charged with keeping checks on abuse of power, ranging from the press on one hand to legislature and courts on the other. So, literally, it was a huge fight back, sir, because I have been following US media, chala scrupulous ga follow avutunnan kabatti, the way they attack Christianity, saying, is this ఏదైనా జరుగుతుంటే is this Christianity అని చెప్పి, the way they attacked even Christian leaders who walked on the side of liberals, saying this is not is this what Christianity says అన్న దాని మీద చాలా అటాక్ చేశారండి వాళ్ళు. So and then the kind of humor and parody they did of Trump and all that, all the things he said, we are aware of. And also at the same time they had tremendous writers attacking whatever, and they had the press which wrote them.
ఓకే.
So, in a nutshell, here is how to you fight populism. You confine the ideological battle to the field of reason where you cannot lose. Idan
Yeah,
crux of all
correct.
you confine the ideological battle to the field of reason where you cannot lose. The opposition tries very hard to make the fight emotive by claiming existential threat to the polity to bypass reason. When they do so,
Please read that again, James.
the opposition tries very hard to make the fight emotive. Opposition ante actually the
Yeah,
right wing.
right wing, yeah,
Yeah, right wing tries very hard to make the fight emotive
emotive.
by claiming existential threat. మనం ఉండం మన ఎంటైర్
Exactly.
కమ్యూనిటీ
Mm,
కమ్యూనిటీయే డిస్ట్రాయ్ అయిపోతుంది అని టు మేక్ ద ఫైట్ ఎమేటివ్ బై క్లెయిమింగ్ ఎగ్జిస్టెన్షియల్ థ్రెట్ టు ద పాలిటీ but to bypass reason. When they do so, the right response is to bring the battle back to the domain of reason by conceding that there could be an existential threat provided the grounds cited were correct and sufficient. So, every time the right wing bolts from the field of reason, it should be cajoled, invited, incited, and beaten back to the fold of reason for a contest.
correct.
ఇక్కడ ఏమవుతుందంటే చాలా లాడ్ ఆఫ్ ది ఇంటెలెక్చువల్స్ వాళ్ళు మా మనల్ని వెలేసేస్తారేమో అన్న
Uh, uh,
భయంతో
uh,
దే ఆర్ నాట్ ఫైటింగ్ బ్యాక్. దట్ ఈస్ వాట్
correct.
ఈస్ హ్యాపెనింగ్.
Exactly.
Remember, the victory here is not to convince the right wing protagonist, but to win and keep the undecided in the liberal fold. This is
Correct.
again
Yeah,
brilliant.
exactly.
The undecided వాళ్ళని హోల్డ్ చేయడానికే
And
దీన్ని, ఎందుకంటే కన్విన్స్ చేయడం అన్నది దట్ ఈస్ ది అల్టిమేట్ ప్రైజ్ టు విన్. సో ఫోకస్ ఆన్ ది ఆడియన్స్, యూజ్ రైట్ వింగ్ obduracy and unreason to shred their case, bypass their emotive appeals, concede to emotion where necessary without denouncing it, but bring the battle back to reason. This is where I fully agree with her.
absolutely, absolutely.
The press in the US was a great ally of the liberals. It refused to buckle under statist pressure. It ignored Trump's fake calls to patriotism and waving the flag to nail his lies. It ignored
Uh,
Trump's fake calls to patriotism and waving flag to nail his lies.
yeah,
It refused to give up on fact checking. It wasn't shy in shredding Trump's fakery. It questioned Trump's partisan motivation. It showed up Trump's policies as suboptimal and grounded in misguided ideology. In short, the press as an institution did what citizens are supposed to do in a democracy and won their support in ample measure. Despite the enormous power and authority at his command, Trump could not win his contest against reporters and editors of the press coming away with a bloody nose every time. This was the main battle in the domain of reason, where Trump was soundly beaten by simple fact checking, calling a spade, and reporting honestly on developments. This battle against right wing populism is the easiest to win, provided the battle can be brought live to the voters via a free press. In India, the tragedy is that the free press remains beholden to power, money, and unreason, Dandi, or has a vested interest in outcomes via media tycoons, who are the weakest link in the media chain, most vulnerable to pressure, when not actively supporting with power. Then this is what is the uh, main entire crux of the problem in India. చాలా బ్యూటిఫుల్ గా 3 లైన్‌లో చెప్పేసింది ఆవిడ.
uh, uh,
మీడియా టైకూన్స్.
uh,
Continue, Andy.
Yeah, yeah, please.
Yeah. Dissenters outnumber fascists in India. The second arena in which reason prevailed over emotion was comedy, parody, humor, and the arts. సార్ అందుకే సార్ మిమ్మల్ని చాలా సార్లు మనకి దగ్గర సింగర్స్ ఉన్నారా అని అడుగుతున్నాను కదండి.
అందుకే ఉన్నారు.
So this is the reason, sir. Here the contest is highly emotive. I'll rereading it again.
Yeah,
The
it's
second
okay.
arena, the second arena in which reason prevailed over emotion was comedy, parody, humor, and the arts. Here the contest is highly emotive, but reason is the clincher. This is an arena where the creative can be used to show up the falsity of right wing outrage effectively and slip reason into the contest. The right parody is an art. Trump was largely a no contest here. Instead, he provided most of the raw material for the parody. If the legions of Jim Crow did not, Jim Crow తెలుసు కదండి మీకు. Jim Crow was the Jim Crow laws అని ఉంటాయండి US లో
అవును.
for the African Americans who
ఆ.
segregation, all that was they're all known as Jim Crow laws. If the legions of Jim Crow did not swell with new adherents from the cities and suburbs, the credit must go to parody shows and comedians. India must not only find such art and artists, but also learn how to support them and keep them out of jail. Each great comedian is worth 100 honest hacks with honest ink and pen. The third arena in which liberals contested the right wing was political. And here, the result is best described as a draw. I do not think the liberals won a great political victory despite wresting control of the presidency, the House, and the Senate. Mm. But they did a great job in holding on to their own and correctly aggregating the victories won by the press and the arts and consolidating them into a solid block of votes.
Wow. Yes.
This is where political organization really worked. And this
Yes.
is what is lacking India law, Indian
Correct.
opposition parties law. The lesson for India is twofold with respect to the political domain. First, we depend too much on politicians. But it is not politicians who create a sense of wrong from right in the polity that ultimately guides voters. That sense is established by individuals reacting to events, the press, the arts, the cultural scene. An individual rarely makes up her mind because of what politicians say, except for the fascists. It's an all important statement, sir. An individual rarely makes up her mind because of what politicians say, except for the fascists. It is more important to focus on culture than politics to win the battle in the arena of reason. ఇది కూడా
Correct.
చాలా important.
Exactly.
On the other hand, politics needs to be able to aggregate dissent from right wing populism into a solid vote. On the other hand, politics needs to be able to aggregate dissent from right wing populism into a solid vote. I think it requires a lot of organization.
Yes.
And that means effective politicians who can build rainbow coalitions and not necessarily potential brainy philosopher kings who can outwit fascists. అవునండి. Who can build rainbow coalitions. And here is where Rahul Gandhi is failing.
Yeah.
The need of the hour is efficient and effective aggregation of dissent. And that is the biggest hole in India's fight against right wing populism and fascism. So, aggregation of dissent ni organize చేయలేకపోతున్నారు. That's simple.
Correct.
Note for the nonce. Not for the nonce అంటే ఏంటండి? Okay. Note for the nonce అన్నది. Okay. Dissent outstrips fascist vote share even in India, which is a big thing for me to know. అది చూసారండి?
One second.
ఓకే.
Nonce in British English, derogatory prison slang, a rapist or a child molester, a sexual offender.
Okay. So I don't know why she used that term there.
Nonce definition is the one particular or present occasion, purpose, or use. How to use nonce in a sentence? Did you? Cambridge says a person who commits a crime involving sex, especially sex with a child.
I don't know why she used that term there. But anyways, the sentence, the preceding sentence from that term is dynamite actually.
Yes.
Dissent outstrips fascist vote share even in India. In fact, by a larger margin than in the US. Why did US officials refuse to bend? Last but not the least, US courts, its quasi judicial officials in election commissions, even cabinet ministers, etc., did not bend before presidential authority and insisted on playing their assigned role in a democracy as they saw fit. This is where individualism, the culture of individualism, comes in. Andy. This helped prevent Trump's perversion of the coercive apparatus of the state to fight his political and ideological opponents. The US judiciary, courts, and the electoral officials did a commendable job in the face of tremendous presidential pressure. But that is what the really talking about, Andy. One for
Yes,
the
yes.
big thing for the history books. This a particular
Exactly.
episode of
Yes,
how,
yes,
yeah,
yes,
how they
yes.
stood up, another. But we must not stop there with our analysis and instead ask, why is it that these officials refuse to buckle under pressure? Why, for instance, did they not cave in, like in India, as some sections have? What enabled them to withstand the pressure? The answer again lies in two things. Firstly, in the nature of contestation, and secondly, in the culture of the people.
Wonderful. Yes.
Let us take the nature of contestation first. In the US, the contest was never about democracy. Both sides were and are equally committed to democracy and rule of law. So, why are they fighting? So, quite a statement here. Both sides are equally committed to democracy. So, but why were they fighting? The liberal argument is that right wing effort to preserve majoritarian privilege destroys democracy. The right wing argument is that the leftist effort to equate unequal groups as equal threatened the identity of the polity. So it harms democracy by making a nonsense of both equality and fraternity. It also loses the individual and newer, smaller collectives. So this is the reason people were not wearing masks. They
Correct.
were fighting against wearing masks because
Correct.
they're saying we don't want to be part of the collective. As I want my individualism to be intact. So that was the case on Matandi. Most of which of the two arguments will weigh in future is difficult to say. So this argument is evolving. So that is what we need to understand. But please note that the fight isn't about democracy, but what harms it more. And the aim on both sides is to preserve democracy. That is not necessarily the case with Indian fascists who seek to overthrow democracy by using its permissive apparatus. ఇది అండర్స్టాండ్ చేసుకోవాలి సార్.
Yes.
ఇక్కడ what is happening is they are showing the Muslim as the bogeyman,
Yeah.
and that Islam is India is under threat from Islam. But the thing is, they're actually trying to overthrow democracy.
Correct.
ఇది చెప్పాలి.
Um,
ఇది your అపార్ట్ డెమోక్రటిక్ రైట్స్ అన్ని పోతున్నాయి మిగతా వాళ్ళకి దీని ద్వారా. ఈ as a consequence of this uh, this thing. Mm. Sure. The second is the role of a nation's culture in determining the sense of what is wrong and what is right. You cannot pin this sense to
the
religion.
second is the role of a nation's culture in determining the sense of what is wrong and what is right. Okay, yeah,
Hmm, hmm. These are all huge arguments.
correct, correct.
You cannot pin this sense to religion, education, nurture, economy, or any
Single
single factor.
factor.
It is at once a combination of all of these things. Culture, as I say, eats both ideology and philosophy for breakfast. It is the key in determining outcomes. How can we then strengthen the Indian culture for defeating fascism? In the near term, this must fall to individual citizens, the press, the comedians, the bards, poets, philosophers, balladeers, and minstrels. The more they get involved in defining our sense of what wrong from right, the easier it will be to fight fascism. This can only happen with educating the masses, Andy.
Correct.
That is why I'm so uh, taken up by your organization. Is exactly a platform వేసి ఉంచారు అది మాస్ ఇప్పుడు it should go into the masses అంతే.
Masses, exactly.
To quote Friedrich Nietzsche, the victors don't write history so much as they write the laws and the moral codes to sustain them. It is through the moral codes they perpetrate themselves by defining culture. What Indian liberals need to learn, one of the key things liberals in India need to do is make themselves familiar with the intellectual history of India and its great tradition of intellectual contestation. From Vedic Brahminical times, Indian intellectual space has never been free of fierce contestation and rebellion against domination by caste or class.
Oh, wonderful. Oh,
Hmm.
wow.
What the fascists think is their greatest source of strength, that is, their control of our ancient history and their intellectual hegemony over us, based on ancient scriptures, may yet be their biggest weakness. But these cannot be exploited and dragged into the arena of reason which Indian traditions permit, unlike those, say, of Christianity or Islam. If if liberals continue to remain ignorant of them, నాకు ఇది అర్థం అవ్వలేదు, but these cannot be exploited and dragged into the arena of reason which Indian traditions permit, unlike those, say, of Christianity or Islam. If liberal continues to liberals should learn more about the ancient traditions.
Correct.
That's what she's saying.
Yes, yes, yes.
Liberals must study Indian systems of philosophy and thought and prepare to contest wrong application of the same for fascist reordering of our moral codes. The window on this can be closed by way of educating the masses
I lost you again. Hello, James. James, I lost you. James, James, you're admitted. You're admitted. James, you're admitted.
I'm here. I got it. You can see my screen, sir.
Yeah, yeah.
Liberals must study Indian systems of philosophy and thought and prepare to contest wrong application of the same for fascist reordering of our moral codes. The window on this can be closed by vague blasphemy laws. So if liberals are late in taking to their necessary, if liberals are late in taking to their necessary homework, they will lose the most favorable arena for their case to fascists by default.
Yeah,
I agree with this totally, Andy.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, that's the end of the article.
Which magazine reported this?
ఏంటండి?
దేంట్లో రిపోర్ట్ అయింది ఇది?
National Herald. I think this belongs to the Congress kada.
I think so. Yeah.
National Herald. National Herald India.com. National Herald